Everybody's been saying that doesn't work. Like, all right. I mean, mine is as easy as yours.
All right, just tell me what it is, please.
Carol, Carole
All right.
at Bitstream,
Ah, got it.
Bitstream
Okay, no QC spelling, EA, right. Yep. Dot
net.
net. Gotcha. I love the dot nets. All right, I got it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Especially
Hey,
with people saying, well, I couldn't copy anything out of.
Dean, I've got Carol's information if you need it.
And I'll just send her a little hello email, uh, and then you can then
Yeah.
we'll have each other's, yep,
But
or
uh,
Apple or whatever.
I would be, I think my pacemaker that's been in there for about 10 years
Wow.
is the old-fashioned kind, it just keeps you beating at a steady rate.
Right. Now, do you have the is it Bluetooth and connected to a device next to your bed that is on the Wi-Fi and all that, or no?
Yes, it is definitely connected to the device
Mhm.
next to my bed, although I don't think that goes through Wi-Fi.
Whatever it goes through. Mine,
Yeah.
it's German and it just works out of the box.
Yeah, I love
Oh,
that.
yeah. God bless the Germans. I'm glad they didn't lose the war too badly, yeah. Yeah.
They lost it pretty badly.
Oh, pretty badly, but yeah, I call it my little happy light. So it has a little green light on it. And I keep
I
it
mean, at
and when
the
I
end there, they were drafting Boy Scouts and guys from the old folks home.
what?
I'm talking about World War II.
The
Oh yeah.
Germans were using children and elderly.
Yeah. Well, you talk about a military corporation doing any and the ends justify the means. I mean, that's the way they looked at their cause, yeah. Um, it's kind
Gott mit uns was written on their, was the logo on their belts.
Germans kind of tend to be full of themselves sometimes. Let's put it that way, right? And
Well, it
believe
was
in
a state, that was I mean, history fell into nationalism as kind of an extension to what I consider to be a religious tribal enthusiasm.
yeah,
You know,
yep,
they kind of went from being praise the Lord and all that to praise the nation.
yeah. I mean, they were one of the most Catholic, still are one of the most Catholic countries on the planet.
Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, I mean, don't the red MAGA hats and shirts remind you of brown shirts, etc., and swastikas? That's how when I see MAGA, I'm seeing a stylized version of swastikas.
I think the brown shirts were in Italy. Am I wrong there?
Um, yeah, brown shirts. Well, the Hitler Youth, let's call them that. Whatever they wore. I don't know. Most of the video is black and white, so I don't know what they're wearing. But
Oh, okay.
the Hitler Youth, which is what we used to call when I lived up Mare Mesa, we had a really nice Mormon ch church about a block away, right? And and the Mormon kids doing their in-country mission, right, would hop on their bicycles in their black pants and their white long sleeve dress shirts and a tie, and we
Oh,
called them the Hitler Youth. I go, oh, here come the Hitler Youth. And they would ride around the neighborhood, and they were great people. I chatted them up and all that. I mean, they're wonderful, well-meaning people, and yada yada yada, and they're very friendly. And I said, yeah, I just, I've been to the tabernacle. I've done it was amazing. I was in awe and all that. I didn't get to the open one in San Diego, Carlsbad, stand on the freeway there. Unbelievable. I mean, it's like the Taj Mahal of Mormon tabernacles. And they would let, they would,
There's an interesting lyric that I've heard in the last week, in two songs, one by the Beatles and one by Steely Dan. The phrase is, "Don't hang that sign on me. Don't hang that sign on me," which I think is a nice way of responding to this labelism that we are addicted to in this world now. What probably always have been. Oh, you're a commie, or you're a fag, or you're a nerd, or where you're, all of these terms that we use as a, and I think that the response to that is, look, do not judge me, which is a classic Christian criticism, or do not, don't give me one label and expect me to live by that in a narrow fashion,
But it's simply a way of our organizing our world. So we're going through the pantry. Oh, this can of beans is getting old, and and we'd like to make things simple to say, okay, I don't want to get into the whole nuance of this, whatever, but I'm going to put this in my I'm skeptical category, or I don't like you category, even though that judgment may be wrong, may not be 100% correct.
Well, there's a term called nomenclature, which is our tendency to word map reality. I call it word mapping reality.
Yeah.
But there's filters that you can use you can always make the terms that you're using sound like you're selling something, and you're trying to make it look like it's good. And if you're trying to buy something, you're trying to make it look like it's bad.
These are all
it's a marketplace of terminology.
That requires something beyond gut reaction, right? It requires some thought. In other words, before I dismiss someone like Mormons or whatever, well, let me know more about that. Oh, by the way,
my take on all of that is that if you get to somebody face to face, which you have to do occasionally, unless you're, believe it or not, I'm not on the screen all the time.
Right.
You have to be able to tell stories. And if you do that, you've just broken the secret code to life.
We are a storytelling species.
Everybody tells a story, and their story is more important than their label.
Right. And I had the opportunity when I was traveling around to come into contact with all kinds of people, that different upbringings, different whatever. And I probably didn't agree with on a whole lot of stuff. But when we sat and talked, or maybe even went out and had a burger and a beer after work, we found out that we had much, much more in common than separated us.
Oh, well, that's almost the Hillary, when you look at the Hillary Clinton campaign sub logo, it was something like we're all together. And I think that's always been more of a Democratic strategy, is to stress the unity and what makes us common. And I think what happens on the other side is that they try to use political descriptions as a segregating factor.
Okay, I got my hand up. So yeah, but what the other side?
Could I interrupt you for a minute, Dean?
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing some of the things I expect to see on my Zoom window, so I'm afraid I have to exit and come back again.
I have the same problem with Stan, and I couldn't see me, but he could see me, and what I did was go up to the view, upper right hand corner, and do not turn on hide self view, but do not turn on hide non-video participants, because I had my Lufthansa up, right? And Stan could see it, but I couldn't see it. And I go, well, that's weird. And
I can't see the participants, which means it's harder to see your hands.
I'm in as the host, David. I came in as the host. David, I came in as host, and I'm recording.
That's fine. Thank you.
By the way, I have not received from Tom Trites the MPEG-4 from last week, so I did not put last week. My last week's presentation is not on YouTube yet.
One problem at a time. So, David, what do you see on your screen? Just you?
No, what I'm not seeing is participants in chat, both of which are helpful to have.
Oh, you're not seeing the icons for.
That's pretty basic. That sounds
Yeah.
odd.
When I
Mine
press the
disappear
button,
and
it
they
doesn't
pop
show
up.
up.
Mine pop up when I slide my cursor down. They will disappear and then they'll pop up if I slide all the way down to the bottom.
That's not the problem.
Okay.
I don't know what the problem is, so I'm going to leave and come back. I will
There
be
you go.
back shortly, I hope.
That's a good solution. Yep.
Now, when I'm on my PC, which I'm on right now, I have to move my mouse in the space where those icons are before they pop up.
Same
But
thing
on
on Mac.
But on my Mac, they stay up all the time.
On my Mac, they don't. We have different Mac.
Yeah.
Or it's a configuration in Zoom, possibly. They take a while to go away, and sometimes they stay there, sometimes they don't.
So, Carol, did you receive my email about that Amanda Ripley, the gal that talks about media and the conflict issue of? I sent it to you because at the end of the session last week, you asked me if I could continue on with that session. And I said, not only could I do that, but I also have another one that I'm thinking might be interesting in that same regard. It's the same big think, with the white background kind of deal.
Right.
And she
I
does
will
some.
tell you honestly, I have not looked at my email for about the last 4 days.
Okay.
Good for you, Carol. That's a 4 days well spent.
So I will take a look after after we're finished with this. And
Her name is Amanda Ripley. She's an ex-Time reporter, and I think she has some nice analysis on how media. I mean, it reminded me of Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent sort of theme. But she has a critique on media that it's basically designed to keep us in a stressed out, conflict oriented stressed out because of the.
it leads.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Being a newspaper person, she would notice that.
I mean, even the local news comes on. Local news I watch to be happy. What you need to be terrified of today. Stay tuned.
Yeah, she said Time Magazine actually put her on the crisis team shortly after 9/11. And so she did nothing but disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, and bad stuff.
A lot of fun.
Well,
all right, I took your advice. I wrote down on one of my little legal pads your email, and now I cannot find it. All right, just say it to me. Carol, Carole at
Bitstream.
Bitstream. I know Bitstream.
Bitstream.net.
.net. All right. And
I've had that email address for over 20 years.
Oh yeah. I had a pacbell.net that it finally went away. Yeah. All right. I just sent a test email from DMAT Petty. All right, there we go. And now I digitally know your
Oh, I would like to contribute an interesting historical tidbit to your discussion of Mormonism. There was a time in the history of the US where Utah had applied to become a state, a US state.
Yep, I know the history. Go ahead, but please though, you'll
And
Oh, yeah.
basically the US told Utah, we will not admit you as a state unless the Mormon religion officially repudiates polygyny.
polygamy. That was the price they had to pay.
Yeah.
And it's still practiced in Arizona. I mean, in Nevada and southern Utah. It's still practiced, but they're kind of excommunicated. But
Yeah.
yep. So they're like no, and I've seen shows on the polygamy, and for those particular people, it seems to work. It's an extension of it takes a village, and we'll be our own village. And we'll have several moms, and they'll have different tasks, and it's just a village. And by the way, Hillary or Billary, um, when she says, takes a village, see the other side, and what was the other one you just said? It takes all of us or whatever. They see that as communism with a capital C. That's the way they read it. Period. They do.
Of course, I have always noted historically that polygynous societies tend to rip themselves apart and fail because what you end up with is a whole bunch of young bachelors, young unmarried men who stand no possibility of ever marrying because
well,
these guys have got all the women tied up.
But with CRISPR or whatever, we could change the male-female ratio to like 4-to-1, which probably would not be a bad idea. And then maybe the darn thing. Oh yeah, real quick. So David, you have a presentation to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, over.
It's 8:03.
10:03 here.
And by the way, is Lynn with one N, is Egolf there's H-Tom. Is Egolf a last name, middle name? It sounds like
a last name now is a middle name.
Sounds like a great video game to me.
It's my maiden name, but I use it as a middle name, and I insist on that so that it won't be hyphenated. So when I fill out forms or somebody fills out forms for me, my first name is Lynn Egolf, like Mary Beth.
Oh, yeah.
So that it doesn't get truncated to just an E.
And I am Dean Thomas Petty, and Thomas is my maternal grandmother's maiden name. Dean Thomas Petty, Gary Thomas Petty, Kimberly Thomas Petty. We are all Thomases, but that is not a first name. It's a last name without the hyphen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not so bad these days. The hyphenating is kind of fallen out of favor.
Are you kidding me? You haven't seen any? They use apostrophes and ampersands and hip hop name. Yeah, but some of these names get so long. There's no way you're going to fill it out on any form.
That's true.
It's impossible. And they have to. These god awful names, and bless them, as family names, but they have to truncate them or do something to fill out a form. That to me would be irritating.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. I keep the video dark because it's a big strain on the capacity of our internet.
Absolutely. Bandwidth.
And so, especially when David's presenting, I don't want to be an added,
Right, because he's up. Yeah,
he's got to be there. So,
anyway, great to see you, Lynn.
Yeah, thank you.
With one N.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Dan, I sent you a...
I got it. I got it up. I got it up.
Well, I'm not sure how much I'm going to use it. We'll see how this goes. I'm doing something I probably shouldn't be doing, but it's a small enough...
That's my motto in life. But
Yay!
You might let me get away with it anyway. Most of what I have is actually text rather than video. So we'll see how that goes.
My God.
Yeah, my God, indeed. Anyway, the way I kind of wanted to start, I enjoyed folk singing back in the 1960s, late 50s, and in through 69. Tom Paxton wrote a song called What Did You Learn in School Today?
Mm-hmm.
And the line from that particular song was, our leaders are the best of men, and so we elect them again and again.
Yeah.
About 85% of the districts in the United States typically vote the same way year after year after year. They are, quote, safe, unquote, seats. So the swing voters are perhaps 15% of the districts in the United States, the voting districts. Yeah.
And they are about 85% of the power, as is Wyoming with 2 senators and 100 people. But that's just the way yeah.
That's the way the Constitution was written.
Exactly.
It was an experiment back then. Now we have to say it worked pretty well for about 250 years. Not very well. We can point to example after example after example where it did not work very well. Yeah, Dean. I can't hear you.
Yeah, unmute. And yeah, there was talk going way back to the 70s, 80s. Republicans and Democrats decided that, gee, it doesn't take 30 days to bring in the votes from whatever. And you know, and we could have, in other words, to get rid of the Electoral College as an anachronism. And now Republicans ain't going to sign up because there would never be another Republican president again if we had direct vote. I mean, well, it would, right, but politics would have to be, they would have to change their game.
About this presentation revolves around.
Right. They would have to change their game from gerrymandering and owning all the states to control the Electoral College and all that. They'd have to find a new game. Good. Politics is a game. The most fascinating game and most dangerous.
There are some other issues. I haven't even gotten started yet, and already I'm being sidetracked. Carol?
Yeah, when I saw your topic, the first thing that occurred to me was, does he mean signal corruption? You know, the sort of thing that Claude Shannon helped out with? Or does he mean political corruption?
I'm not familiar with your reference. Claude Shannon?
Yeah.
Mathematician.
Didn't he do the error correction code?
Yeah.
You mean the corrupted files on my MacBook or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about that kind of corruption, although there is some. It is a complex system, so it's all connected.
Okay. Well,
But I was particularly looking at political corruption.
Okay.
And it's very hard to talk about political corruption without getting into discussions of degree, because both the Democrats and the Republicans are guilty of various forms of political corruption. It's just that it seems to be a race to the bottom, and the Republicans are way ahead of the Democrats in that respect. Tom?
The way back when Social Security started, there was a problem because the system was set up to use very early Hollerith cards. And with the 10 digits for the name, that meant names had to be less than 80 characters. But some people's formal full name was more than that.
Huh. That wasn't the only problem.
No.
It was a legal Ponzi scheme. In that respect, Elon Musk is absolutely correct. It is a Ponzi scheme. When the government does it, that makes it legal. If anybody else did it, it's illegal. But that's a different problem.
Oh. I don't think of it as a Ponzi scheme. I just think of it as tax.
Yeah. Anyway.
Social Security is not a savings account.
Well, the Congress has been using it.
I'm muted. It was set up just like an IRA. It was our money, it was invested, and then Congress decided to rape it and throw it in the general fund. And that was the end of Social Security as we know it. It just became another,
Well,
that's a fact.
Yes.
I mean, it's much more complex than that, but.
Yeah, and who was it promised us that our Social Security would never be taxed?
Are you kidding me? Yeah. Don't look at my. Yeah.
Well.
Yep.
Democracy is not very good at multi-4-year or 6-year consistency, especially when we have a balanced situation where it goes back and forth from one party to the other. I did a presentation on voting a while back and said that until I was convinced that all of the votes were going to be allowed and all of the votes were going to be counted, I didn't expect to see much improvement in our government's performance. And unfortunately, this last election has confirmed me in that belief. So part of what I have has to do with the fact that we were told the fix was in, and the fix was in. It's pretty sophisticated. It's also pretty obvious, and we can get into that if you want to talk about some of the more sophisticated ways that this last election was stolen. But there's little question in my mind. I couldn't believe we would elect Donald Trump again. We didn't. But that's a different question. The other thing I want to talk about is a book called Moneyland. It's by Oliver Bullough, and it was written about 6 years ago. And we'll see if I can
Please
show
type
you
it in the chat. Please type it in the chat.
Take a screenshot, if I can show you.
I'm not seeing anything to take a screenshot of.
Well, I have to share it with you. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
Dean, you can remember Moneyland, Moneyland. Repeat it to yourself 3 times.
It's pretty straightforward. It's true. Oh, come on. Huh.
Just tell us the
computer is
author.
not being very fast.
I've already got it written down. No worries. Moneyland. Moneyland. Got it.
It's subtitled, oh, come on, where is it? I tried to share it and I don't see it. Oh, this is going to be awkward. Huh. Well, if I can't share screen, that's going to be very awkward. Well, the subtitle is The Inside Story of the Crooks and Kleptocrats Who Rule the World.
David, it looks like I'm able to share screen. I'll Google it and do that for you.
Yeah, but I have, well.
You have other things you want to share? We'll deal with that when we get there.
Well, what I'll do is send you the whole folder, but.
Does this book, David, include the most recent election?
No, it was written 6 years ago.
Hmm.
So it's been around for a while and ignored for most of that while by both parties.
There's a group called the Election Truth Alliance that has done some really good analysis on the swing state win, which is statistically impossible. Their numbers are really good. Their stats are really good too. The election,
but it's not trivial to understand from their pictures what happened. It's very clear that something did not go correctly. If we get to it.
Ah,
Are you seeing it now?
Mm-hmm.
I just in 10 seconds, 5 seconds, I pulled up the Amazon book and I sent it to the email addresses that Siri knows, and that was Stan and Carol.
Okay, so are you through with it?
Right,
wanna
but there's
on
also a
screenshot?
video. There's also a video game called Moneyland, and that was the first 10 hits.
Is that the
Yeah.
Kiyosaki game?
Pardon me?
Never mind. If it didn't ring a bell, it's not.
No, I that book is I heard about it.
being a true skeptic, you could argue that there's always been a bit of thievery going on in politics, not just recently, but
Yeah, this is.
Do you think? Come on.
This is. I'm sorry, Shakespeare would say this is old news.
Absolutely, no question.
Exactly.
And it's much easier to talk about African dictators who rob their country and send their money offshore so that it can't be grabbed back, or Russian oligarchs who do the same sort of thing.
And yeah, I can finish your sentence. And Elon Musk and Apple and everything else that offshore their money.
Yep. And in point of fact, Great Britain basically offshored a lot of their financial information. Typically not the money, but they offshored their financial information to their colonies, which is part of why some of the Caribbean islands are known for being
Tax havens.
The Caymans are the tax haven of the world. Yeah. And Britannia ruled the sea, and that's what they set up. Yep.
Eric, we're talking a little bit about a book called Moneyland.
Okay.
How the inside story of the crooks and kleptocrats that rule the world.
Yeah.
Well, they don't really rule the world. That's a little bit overstated. But his point is, anytime there are different rules that might favor the rich, you build up a whole cadre of services to take advantage of those different rules. And somebody made the distinction between naughty money and dirty money and evil money. I'm not sure that that's very helpful, but we can certainly say there does seem to be a difference in degree. And the people who would like to hide their money probably have something to hide, or they think it will sell their product better if people don't know about it. And so from the point of view of the governments of the world who would like to have their taxes collectible, the more they can arrange to have the owners of property known and readily available, the less likely it is that kleptocrats will steal money in their country and offshore the control of that money. Unfortunately, the laws are on the books pretty much worldwide at this point, but the enforcement is very spotty. And you can see why that would happen when you look at the United States, where South Dakota has laws that do not require the owner to be readily available. And Nevada is doing the same thing. And so those two states have pulled in a lot of international money, quote unquote, but that's not really quite what's happening. What happens is the control of that money. Corporations that supposedly own that money go to the states where the ownership isn't required to be public. Yeah, it's not.
As a long-time former resident of South Dakota, I have to point out that these laws were made back in the 1800s when South Dakota was just becoming a state, and it took 5 days to get from one side of the state to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was either a horse or Shank's mare, and you couldn't do it on foot in 5 days.
Right.
So saying that someone has to be immediately available was considered by the legislator to be nonsense.
Right. No, what I mean is that the owner is allowed to be anonymous, or is allowed to be a corporation, and the corporation does not have to publish who the beneficiaries of the corporation are. They do not have to report interest paid to that beneficiary. Yeah, go ahead.
That's none of your business.
Well, except that from a social point of view, it is
this is abandoning the hen house. It's my money. I can do what I want with it. You don't get to tell me.
We do get to tell you.
No, you don't.
It's written in the Constitution.
No, it's not.
Nobody else is allowed to tax.
All right, hand up. Yes. Where do I? Who do I address my lawsuit to? I have the legal right to know who is causing me damage, who and where and what entity I'm going to sue. We have that. Somebody has TV or something playing in the background. Very irritating. Not me. Probably Stan. Yeah, I have the legal right to know what Russians are buying the house next door to me and building a 16-unit apartment building in because of the laws and all that. Yeah, I have the legal right to know whom or who to sue if they affront me.
It's more subtle than that. You've heard that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, but money corrupts, and money influences our elections.
Money is power.
And if corporations don't have to report who they pay interest to and who they benefit, we don't know who is paying the bills. And that has been a continuing problem for the last 75 years that has only gotten much worse. Yeah, Dean.
Interrupt. So, define corporation. If it is a public corporation, as in selling stock on one of the markets, then yes, there are laws. If it is a family corporation, which many, many, many are, then they can do what they want.
More, but they also have to deal with the laws. And you
Yes.
have to, it's interesting to think of why corporations were set up in the first place. They were set up to limit the liability on the stockholders so that the corporation could be more entrepreneurial and not risk bankrupting the stockholders.
But also a way of raising capital.
Yep.
And yeah, and so it has to be but if you're family owned, then you can do what you want to do. Go where you want to.
That's a little overstated, I'm afraid. But
Yeah, no, but I mean, much more so than they're not under the. Is that my damn TV that's making noise? Okay.
No, it's Eric.
Yeah.
No, it's not mine.
Yeah.
I'm muted.
But they're not under. If you don't publicly trade on a market, then the rules are quite different. But yes, of course, there are still rules and laws.
Yep.
But you don't have the SEC. Yeah, SEC is out of your life if you're a family.
Right. Lynn, did you have something?
Yeah, it's technical. The echo is definitely coming from Dean, because at the end of what you say, I can hear the last couple of words in your voice.
Dean's audio is muted, so he's not providing anything.
Right.
No, but when he talks, well, now I'm hearing myself echo too.
Well, echo is
coming
different. What I am hearing is a TV in the background or a YouTube.
The echo is coming from the person who's speaking. It's like everybody gets the echo if they're talking.
I'm not talking about echo. I'm talking about TV or YouTube playing in the background. I don't know. It's probably on my end.
If you look at the participants list, on the right-hand edge, there's a set of microphones that show whether or not you are muted. And if you are not, there's a little bar that bounces up and down showing how much audio you're providing. And when I said it was Eric, I had looked at that, and Eric's, who is unmuted, was bouncing up and down in time with the audio I was
I'm hearing
hearing.
it right now as an experiment.
So am I.
Well, my
Can
TV
Eric
is off. So
Eric, can you mute for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds?
Your audio says it's not muted, Eric.
okay, where's mute? Okay, how do I do that? Let's see, audio, video, audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the way
If
on the
you
left.
click on mute.
It's gone.
Okay, now let's see what happens.
No,
Are we
I'm still
getting
hearing
that
it.
echo?
I'm still hearing it. I'm going to mute. Mute one at a time, please. That's the way
Okay,
to.
I'm going back on.
So are we getting an echo now?
Lynn?
Yeah.
It's not an echo I'm hearing. It is somebody talking in the background, or it's like an echo. I can't tell.
Carol, you had a comment.
Yeah, let's get back on topic. We'll just have to put up with it.
That's the definition of Zoom. We have to put up with it.
Carol, you muted? I think, Stan, you can mute everyone, can't you?
You can mute them one at a time.
Okay, so
It's not horrible. It's just mildly irritating. So
That's everybody muted right there.
Eric is not muted.
He is, according to my chart.
Now he is.
yep.
I think it's this phenomenon with the speaker. I remember Tom Schreitz sounded a little echoey. Then Dean sounded echoey. Everybody who talked was sounding echoey, so it could be just a Zoom thing. That's my
It could be
point.
crosstalk, as in we're hearing someone else's meeting. That's the way ones and zeros work. And it almost sounds like crosstalk, and that can happen. Trust me, that can happen.
That's true.
I did this crap for.
I'd like to read you a little bit out of Money Land. In reference, they're discussing the background for how we got this way, and they're talking about the Bretton Woods discussion back in 1944 after World War II. The thread of economic life in every nation is inseparable, woven into the fabric of the world economy. Let any thread become frayed, and the entire fabric is weakened. No nation, however great and strong, can remain immune. It was this reasoning that persuaded them of the merits of locking speculative wealth behind the national borders where democratic governments could keep an eye on it. The system the Allies created did not last as long as its creators hoped, and it was frequently criticized during its lifetime for, among other things, the high tax rates the participating governments imposed. But its achievements look remarkable in retrospect. As the British journalist Ed Conway points out in The Summit, his history of the Bretton Woods event and its aftermath, between 1948 and early 1970s, the world enjoyed progress and stability never rivaled before or since. The world's gross domestic product expanded by an average of 2.8% a year, more than the equivalent rate for the preceding and succeeding periods. For those charmed 2.5 decades, there was not a single global recession. Since the system collapsed with Richard Nixon's abandonment of the dollars pegged to gold in 1971, there have been 4 worldwide recessions. Any comments?
I think it's interesting that that time frame is the birth of the awakening of the environmental crisis and the limitations to growth that is basically just based upon the world itself. I mean, there's this story about how many Earths does it take to be America? How many Earths does it take to be someone from Bangladesh? You need about 5 Earths to make the whole world as wealthy as Americans. And that idea that we have restrictions to our supply chains and our supply lines. And that really came to fruition with the awakening of the environmental crisis in the 70s.
There are a couple of things that happened in the late 60s and early 70s that most of us should remember. The environmental movement was attempting to be going in the 1960s, but Nixon unattaching the dollar from gold. If you just look at everything in economic forecasting and histories of values and stock markets, they're going along very nicely. They're ups and downs, just kind of smooth thing. And gold on the dollar became unhitched from gold, and it was just an explosion of everything.
But the problem back then that Nixon was dealing with is that other countries were using the dollar as the global reserve currency, no question about that.
Yep.
But the gold was leaving Fort Knox every year. And so it was clear that that couldn't continue the way it was going. Well, it was going to bankrupt the United States.
Yeah, but
that was the solution that the financial institutions liked best. It was not necessarily a good solution.
But do I have a turn?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not new. Nixon didn't invent this stuff. I mean, you go back to the gold standard and the silver certificate, and all of that's been going on forever. And then they found out that Colorado and Nevada don't have enough gold to keep Fort Knox overflowing. And then silver became the thing and all that. So, and I still have my silver certificates, and they're worth $1.01, $5.05 right now. Because we have a fiat currency now, right? They're all reserve notes.
I think that there are essentially 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of gold in the world.
But not true with diamonds, by the way, because they are making gem quality diamonds for pennies, and De Beers knows how to do that, and it's all about marketing. And you won't know that you got a real diamond, but by God, you'll tell your friends you got a real natural diamond. They are chemically, physically identical. No one can tell the difference.
Indistinguishable.
They can dope them to whatever color they want. They can make, it's unbelievable.
Carol?
We're all going to be dripping with diamonds, I guess.
No.
Not me.
They're not going to put that many of them on the market at any one time. They know how to manage a monopoly. Carol?
There'll be separate monopolies, the fake ones and the real ones. Yep.
Okay, 2 things. To quote William Jennings Bryan, "You shall not crucify mankind on a cross of gold." They were having problems with it way back then. However,
1900.
you guys are missing one of the really big things that happened with decoupling the dollar from gold. And that was the gold standard prevented inflation of the currency. The minute you go off the gold standard, the currency starts to inflate.
It's a little more complicated than that. It depends on supply and demand of money.
I'm just saying you need to take this into account. when you're
Mhm.
looking at
Yeah,
things that changed when we went off the gold standard. And
well,
that's a big change.
That was a big
the
change.
Federal
Dean?
Reserve was put together by the big banks back around the early 1900s to potentially solve a major problem that they could have had. And they have been running things ever since with basically some public requirements set by Congress and some private requirements set by the banks that own them, and attempting to balance basically three tasks. Usually you can get two of the three, but it's somewhat difficult at times to do all three. Dean, you had something else? And Carol, were you done?
Would you list the three?
No, I can't remember. One of them is to keep full employment.
Can I, a technical thing, because I'm a technician engineer, would it be feasible for Stan to end the meeting, restart it, and see if we can get rid of that crosstalk? Because I am 80% not feasible.
I'm guessing that will not necessarily
It's not
do
gonna
it.
fix. That won't
I've
fix
had
it.
trouble with my system,
Yeah.
and it may be that if my system is the
It
problem,
reminds me of, you remember when you used to make a long distance call and you would be calling New York and you would be hearing crosstalk? Very, very common. It reminds me of that, but
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
hearing it.
Yeah, I'm hearing it. I've been on other Zoom things and we've tried this, abandon this, and everybody call in again. Doesn't change it.
doesn't fix it. And it's
No.
not just Zoom. I have used the bulletproof Microsoft and the federal ones and all that, and they have the same problems. They're going over the same fiber optics. Yeah.
did that help things any? I turned my volume down.
Yeah, I'm not hearing
Yes.
anything now.
Yes.
Now,
Better.
now it's back.
Ha!
It comes. I'll
Eric,
just.
do you want to mute?
I will try to ignore it, but it's difficult because I'm obsessing on it now.
Carol,
Yes,
you had a comment?
I would like you to name the three things that you said you can get two of, but not all three.
Oh, I can look that up, but that's a totally separate discussion.
Well, I think it would be significant. I mean, you just
Yeah,
mentioned
it's
it.
all connected,
Yeah,
but let's see if we can stay on political corruption.
okay.
It's fairly obvious. Well, I would like to make the case that Moneyland makes that part of the reason oligarchs and dictators steal money in their own country and send it offshore is because they can. They think they are going to get away with it. To the extent that offshore requires the owners of property and the beneficiaries of corporations to be publicly known, that tends to slosh the money somewhere else. And if we could find all the somewhere else's, it would make it less likely that the rich could get away with hiding their money. For obvious reasons in the United States, we think that would make a significant difference in the amount of taxes that could be collected. The same applies to Great Britain and Europe. At this point, those have been the basic money supply for the world over the last 100 years. Yeah, H.
But we have pretty much changed to taxing income rather than taxing possession, other than real estate.
Yeah, well, and
Yes and no.
yes and no.
Been a long time
But
since
the
I paid
question
any
is-
tax on the gold.
You don't live in Missouri. Lafayette County taxes everything on my farm there every year. Every tractor, every lawnmower, every weed whacker, the farmer tax. And we're not wealthy farmers, but we have a utility trailer, we have a tractor, we have this, and they tax it every frickin' year, and it's real money.
Yep. And all of us would like the government to do things for us that we cannot individually do. That's what government, that's the justification for government. None of the colonies, the 13 colonies that started the United States, could manage their interstate commerce by themselves. The same is true these days for international trade. Trump is not having very good luck with his negotiations, but we'll get to that perhaps.
Oh,
I'd like to read a little more of Moneyland to you. The corrupt elites that we allow to buy property and influence in Western countries don't stop being crooks just because they've flown over an ocean. They are polluting public life here just as they did in the countries where they, quote, earned, unquote, their fortune. For reasons of national security, public health, and public order, we should all care about Moneyland. I recognize, however, that these arguments are unlikely to spur government action for the understandable reason that it's difficult to persuade people of the merits of a course of action that will cost them money. Moneyland's enablers pay taxes, and tackling them will give public finances a short-term hit. That's why governments have taken action, but enforcement has often been lackadaisical at best. To look at the response by U.S. banks to White House modest attempts to make them report foreigners' interest payments to those foreigners' home countries. Quote, kidnapping is not just a theoretical concern for these depositors. Having their deposit information leaked is a real threat to them, said Gary Schweibel, executive vice president of a Texas bank, which predicted a massive capital flight if the regulations took effect, as well as the collapse of many banks. The regulations took effect anyway in 2011, and in the years since, not only has IBC Bank of Laredo, Texas, not gone under, but its stock price has tripled. His bank's resilience may be the result of the fact that his and other objections persuaded the U.S. authorities to limit the number of countries they were willing to exchange information with. Mexico and Brazil are on the list. Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Equatorial Guinea, Afghanistan, Nigeria, and various other countries are not on the list. Any comments?
It's complicated.
It's complicated, all right.
Yeah, can I talk a little bit? Yeah, when I found my biological father in 1975 in South Pasadena, he sort of clued me in how all this works at least up to the national, through the national level. And, after he moved out to Whittier after the World War II, he had been in Army intelligence, and he taught himself the bar law while he was supporting his family, and then he became drinking buddies with another young lawyer out there named Richard Nixon, and yeah, he taught how it works basically. Well, he says Nixon had to go into politics because he couldn't write a brief. He said he couldn't get a conviction on a drunk crashing into a police car in a Mormon community. And how his first Senate campaign, actually, the whorehouse Jaxel man, the whiskey merchant, that actually funded his first run out there against a left-wing woman because she'd been one of his whores, and she wouldn't do certain sexual acts I won't get into. He funded Nixon to get at her. But that's how it goes. And he says, well, basically, just use your common sense. Even that time, and when the numbers were about digits, a zero smaller or so, he says, why do you think somebody spends $1 million on a Senate campaign to win a job that pays $100,000 a year? And he himself made money as a lawyer, helping his rich Mexican clients occasionally move all their assets into the U.S. when they're degenerate, corrupt government, which is even worse than ours, if that's imaginable, would trash their currency for their own enrichment. And it could go on, but that's how it works.
We live in a corrupt society.
But unless you have investments, it's why stress yourself in your remaining years about things that have gone on forever and always will, unless and until eugenics puts more altruism genes into people, like the moral molecule or something. We got to study that. That's got to be studied. It's not going to stop. You're not going to do anything. The only reason to study this is if you have investments and you can protect them or enhance them better by understanding something of what's going on. Well, I've done it. You say no, but I do it. Oh, go ahead.
Right.
I'll stop there for now.
I don't totally agree with that. I mean,
the question is, what would happen if everyone did it?
Yeah, I understand. But you're kind of cracking me up corruption as though that's a industrial revolution thing. It's been going on for 200,000 years.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's always been. You study Roman history.
Yeah, that is what you're saying. Yeah. But is it stupid to try to push back against corruption? I don't think it is. I mean, it's a finger in the dike, but or whatever. I think, I don't know, but I think it is worthwhile to push back against it.
If you have the power, but we as individuals, what realistically are we as individuals going to do about this?
Well, nothing, but collectively we can do things about it. Thus, the 12 million.
That's what happens.
Magna Carta and etc. Right.
There's a political pendulum, if you will, in attitude, and it swings back and forth. When it gets too bad, some reformer runs for office and attempts to try and do something about it. Stan, I think, and then Carol.
I do recall that I did a presentation a few weeks ago on the future of the middle class. And I think the premise is that if you have a middle class, all boats rise. When you elevate the basic, like, for example, minimum wage for people. I just saw a presentation recently about the Walton family in the Walmart corporation. It's one of the largest corporations in the world. They're one of the wealthiest families in the world. and they actually did a huge amount of their money by having employees so poorly paid that they're having to apply for tax or income assistance from the government. So we're funding Walmart's wealth at the expense of the poor. And I think it was Nick Hanauer, which I was featuring in my presentation on the future of the middle class, claiming that elevating raising the minimum wage to a livable wage is going to basically increase the power and the quality of life, and it's going to also increase the wealth of the wealthy. They have to realize that because people are going to need money to buy the things that they want them to buy. So it's Henry Ford spending $5 an hour or a day on employees to work in his car garage, in his factory, so they can buy Model Ts.
But
For
can
some
I correct,
reason, that equation, there's a
can I
couple
correct you
people
real
ahead of
quick,
me, Dean.
Stan?
Carol's ahead of me, and I'm
Just
still
a
not
minute.
done.
After Carol.
Okay. I think you guys are making a serious mistake here when you talk about corruption as though it were a binary thing. Either we have it or we don't. That is a serious mistake. Because you're going through all of this, oh, they had it back in Rome and blah, blah, blah. The proper way to look at it is the amount of corruption, because the amount of corruption, generally speaking, has a knee in the curve. You know, you're going along and you're going along and you get a certain amount of corruption. It's going up a little, but all of a sudden you will reach a point where the graph goes like that. And at that point, more corruption is going to destroy your economy. I mean, it's, you know, it's like blood donations. If everybody gave a pint of blood a month, they're fine. If you try to have everybody give 2 pints a month, they're in bad shape, and you try for 3 and they're dead.
Am I next or?
Yes.
I don't think we're going to finish that discussion.
All right, real quick. I've given 15 gallons of blood over my life, but they won't take it anymore. Anyway, where I disagreed with Stan is his definition of middle class. Working at Starbucks or Walmart is not middle class. You cannot have a middle class unless you have a working class. Otherwise, what's the middle of what? The middle is everybody going down to the food stamp level. You see what I mean? And yet, so Walmart can be a career. If you work at In-N-Out Burger, college students with degrees end up working for In-N-Out for their lives. Very middle class. Costco, same thing. Different kinds of corporations. But you cannot have a, quote, middle class. It's a bell curve. You can't have a middle class unless you have an upper class and an upper middle and a lower middle and a working class. That's the definition of middle class.
But it depends on whether an average person can afford an average house and an average car on an average job.
Define average, but yeah, I understand that.
We're not going to solve that one today either.
No.
What Moneyland suggests, and I'd like to read you a little bit from their conclusion. The solution is not to pull up the drawbridge or to demonize foreigners who flee their collapsing countries in the hope of a better life in the lands where their nation's money has found a home. The solution is to solve the root causes of the instability that is driving the refugee crisis in the first place. If we can stop the ruling elites of Niger or Russia or Syria or Central America from stashing their stolen wealth offshore, we can help stop them from stealing.
How are you
Remember,
going to do that, Dave?
corruption is a crime of opportunity, and the people are far less likely to steal if they know they won't get away with it. We need to shine light into the dark side of globalization, impose transparency on the ownership of wealth and property, and find out who really owns what. Once we have done that, the Moneyland pathway will collapse, and we'll be able to prosecute the corrupt and identify them as the thieves that they are. So what do we as citizens need to do? We need to know who owns what. We need to put crooks in jail. We need to stop our cities from laundering the stolen wealth of the world. We need to support any politicians prepared to build the coalition required to do this patient, taxing, technical, and unglamorous work. Only by doing this can we truly take back control of our economies and our societies and halt the wholesale looting of the world that threatens us all. That's the end of Moneyland.
It sounds like wishful thinking. Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah.
I should cancel my order from Jeff Bezos. I'm getting the book tomorrow, and I said when I'm done with it, I will email it to mail it to anyone. But
Well, let me suggest you could probably get it from Half Price Books.
I probably could. But if I get it for $15 paperback, brand new, and I can share it with other people, that's prorating. That becomes a used book.
I got mine from the public library. They had 2 copies. Nobody was reading either of them.
Right.
But,
Okay,
oh, by
I'm
the
just
way,
saying, if we all want to go out and buy a copy of Moneyland, it's old enough that we could do it through Half Price Books.
Yep.
No argument with that. But you can get a free book from Dean for the price of postage. So that's
Or another way, I found first I try to get a book from the library to see if I really want to own it and refer to it again. And
Yeah.
if I do, then usually I find the best deals on you go to Amazon, not on the new one. Sometimes the new is the only a new book, but if it's at all out for a year or more, you look at the other options and you can find it like from Goodwills and other places like for $5 and $3
right.
or $4 postage. That's where I've generally gotten the best deals.
But you can't get it on your doorstep tomorrow by 8 a.m. with Amazon. That's the problem.
We should hopefully plan ahead, if you want to buy it for these discussions, try to post the.
Well, I just heard about the book this morning.
Yeah.
And I want it. That's the way I am. I want it.
Yeah,
I can tell you about a book.
You've given me enough
but they're
information on
now
this
owned
book
by Amazon.
that I'm going to
That's
go
a
out and buy
side
it.
discussion that I would prefer not
I
to get off into.
I hate myself every time I buy something on Amazon, and I try not to.
He's made my life much better. For all its faults, whatever, they keep improving it and making my life better. For that, I'm grateful.
It is vastly improved. Their website, everything. And that's how we won't go off onto the Amazon discussion, please.
Yeah.
It's much easier to make the case for public libraries.
No argument.
Don't have things.
They're closing all of our libraries in San Diego because we are $250 million in debt. $250 million. And they're going to be closing the libraries.
When you say we, The state of
The
California,
city, the
California.
city,
city of San
the little
Diego.
miserable city, 1.9 million people. We are $250 million in debt. Our city debt, national debt, is $250 million. Unbelievable. A
Yep.
wealthy city.
Yeah, in
And
Minneapolis, they had a quick drop their
partially
subscription
that's
to Nature,
because
the most
our
eminent
government
publication of the
has been
world.
promising.
One at a
And
time.
either of you.
I think I was talking first, but go ahead.
Well, I can do the presentation or I can let you talk, Eric. Go ahead.
Okay, just that even Minneapolis, well, now Hennepin County libraries that had dropped their subscription to Nature, which I used to read there free, the most eminent publication in the world, because it's about science and progress. So they could buy more books in Somali and Hmong and so on.
And that's a political decision.
Yeah, that's how it goes with a universal democracy, especially when the rulers decided to replace the stubborn, individualistic, hard to control voters with more desperate, docile ones that will be permanent votes for their meager handouts that they steal from the dwindling productive minority.
You're right back on topic.
Yep. Okay, go ahead. That's all for now.
I would like to transition to whether or not we actually voted for Donald Trump. Carol, you had something else before we get off this?
Yes, just
money in politics?
a tidbit for Eric. You remember Hank?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Many years.
I spent quite a few years helping him with his tax business.
Mm-hmm.
And he had one tax client who was a Hmong woman, and she was a vascular surgeon. And she was taking in over $400,000 a year in wages on, the hospital was paying her to operate, and she was getting over $400,000 a year on a W-2. And yeah, not all of your immigrants are minimum wage docile voters. There we go.
I'm well aware that the average of some of these immigrant groups, even from Nigeria, are higher average income than Americans. Because we get sometimes you get the cream of the crop, or the ones that I don't know.
And she was paying taxes on all of this.
Well,
yeah, we brain drain Africa and the Middle East and China and everything. We brain drain them.
Yeah,
we used to.
Oh, what do you mean? We still do. That's what the universities are set up to do. Our universities.
Well, the current administration has almost stopped us being able to brain drain.
Yeah, I maybe told this. I finished my degree at San Diego State in computer engineering, and I took a whole lot of 500 level master's classes in my senior year, and all these guys from the subcontinent were over here, and we were study buddies, and they were just gonna punch their card, get their masters, and they had good jobs waiting for them at Qualcomm. And Qualcomm, it's in every one of your phones, has a motto. We speak 50 languages at Qualcomm, and 49 of them are versions of Hindi. You know, it got taken over by Indians, and they're brilliant, and you know all of that. But you see, that's taking opportunity away from someone that was born here. And you know, they're great people and all that, but you know, we have great people also. Do we need to import all of our brain power? I would hope not.
And there's a serious problem with the Chinese coming here. Yeah, I have a very good friend
We won't,
Chinese.
we
but
won't go there, but absolutely, yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of them are brilliant. But also the CCP is extremely exploiting that. They get them over here, and they have a police force within America, and they monitor everybody here. And
That's a huge difference between China and India, right? Yep.
Yeah. And I wouldn't hire somebody if they have family left in China, even if they're sincere and honest and just want to get ahead.
Me too.
You say, "Oh, your mother in China has cancer. We could help her get some drugs that could save her life if in treatment if you could help the motherland a little bit."
Decades ago, you remember the Shah of Iran and all that.
Oh yeah,
When I was a double E back in San Diego State in the 70s, right? We had a whole lot in computer engineering and other engineering people from Persia, as I like to call it, Iran.
yeah.
And they wanted to talk, and they were very interesting. And they would only talk to me privately because they said, okay, if we have, I think, let's say 40 students in the double E department, he said, 4 of them are spies for the Shah.
Mhm.
And that's why they're driving the Mercedes and the Jaguar, because they are being paid for. They're also becoming engineers and getting the education and making a whole lot of money spying on their countrymen. And China ain't that much different than the Shah.
Oh, they're far more efficient.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Far more
You know,
resources and far more effective, and they got a lot more smart people here.
but Russia had 5-year plans. China
Yeah.
has 25 and 50.
Yeah, and they've been dedicated their long term since they took over in '49 is to replace us as the dominant world power.
They play the long game.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Oh, we have these curves.
I can't hear you.
Louder.
We have these curves that go like this. And what we want to do is take this bottom piece and move it over here. But what that really does is it just takes and shifts the whole curve this way. What used to be middle class has become poverty. And there isn't the 49 of the 50 languages. The other language is mathematics. Mathematics doesn't lie. It may conceal, but it doesn't lie. You can't build a culture where everybody is above average. You can't even build a country where everyone is average. And if you're welcome to try, but you will not succeed. But what you will do is create a society where there are a lot of people who are very angry about what they think the society has done to them. And that's what we have here. I don't know what to do about it. Got no clues.
Done?
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I was getting into working class versus middle class, and the old idea of immigration, somebody came over here from wherever, Europe, typically, and they were working class for a generation or a generation and a half, but they had a path to the middle class. And that is the American dream, or was, as in, and it's still going on today. People come over from whatever, and they sacrifice everything, and then their kids go to college, and then they find out that there's no jobs because they're all being stolen by H-2B visas and everything else, and that's a problem. But yeah, the working class should have a pathway to the quote middle class. That's all anyone asks, right? Of a society, is that there is a ladder that if I work hard enough, that I can climb. That's my American dream.
Yeah.
David, would you continue on with your discussion about the last election?
I'm trying to figure out how to be able to share screen when I can't share screen.
Is there something I can share on my end?
Well, I'm thinking there is, but
I've got your Word file up here.
yeah, let's look at some of those. If you would show the Wikipedia definition of corruption, that should be the first thing on the list of videos. The print is pretty small. Can you blow it up a bit? Control plus works on my system. Thank you.
Control plus, control minus, and control zero.
To acquire illicit benefits or abuse power for one's own gain. Corruption may involve activities like bribery, influence peddling, and embezzlement, as well as practices that are legal in many countries, such as lobbying. Political corruption occurs when an office holder or other governmental employee acts in an official capacity for personal gain. Historically, corruption has a broader meaning concerned with an activity's impacts on morals and social well-being. The ancient philosopher Socrates was condemned to death in part for, quote, corrupting the young, unquote. Of course, the story gets told by the victors. We don't know that that's the whole story. At any rate, when I talk about political parties that both are guilty of corruption, we seem in the United States to have one party that's significantly worse than the other. Dean?
Yes, the demagogues by a mile. The demagogue party.
Dean, you had your hand up, and Eric, you didn't.
You talk,
I can't see you.
there, the Zoom won't let me talk. Yeah, I scrolled down. I have that wiki page up, and now I lost it. But Professor Yung Ong has unbundled corruption into 4 types. Let's see. Anyway, yeah, it's yeah, systemic. Oh, geez. Okay, yeah, petty corruption, grand corruption, systemic corruption, and yeah. Anyway, very interesting.
Yeah, it is. But all of them, for all of them, we have a social reason to want to limit the amount that occurs in our society. We'd like to eliminate corruption, but even just reducing the amount would be a good thing.
Why? In some ways, corruption is a lubricant.
But do we want that kind of lubrication? The problem is, essentially, you have criminals, you have people who are willing to benefit themselves at the expense of the society. That cannot help but degrade the society they live in. Apparently, Richard Nixon tried to keep the United States in South Vietnam, when he was running against Lyndon Johnson. He sent a message that he would give a better deal if he were the president than the politicians in South Korea could get from Lyndon Johnson. That's awfully close to treason. Ronald Reagan did something similar when he was running. And there were something like 80 captives in Iran at that point. And he suggested to Iran that they not release them till he was president, and he would give them a better deal. That was awfully close to treason. The Republican Party has basically spent the last 40 years packing the Supreme Court. I haven't got Thom Hartman's book on the Supreme Court, but we could spend quite a bit of time talking about that and how that has corrupted the political situation in the United States today. Dean?
And it's driving me nuts scrolling around in that Wikipedia, because I have my own Wikipedia running in the background. Yeah, so Supreme Court, everything that we are saying about Donald Trump, or much of, was said about FDR. Do you remember him?
Yep.
Yep. And they
No.
have taken that, and the Republicans have never forgotten FDR, and they are taking that as their model and one-upping what FDR tried to do. Yeah, and so you don't just say Republicans do it, but FDR did it to save the world, save the free world.
I think I introduced this program by saying that both of our political parties are guilty of corruption.
Right.
At this
Right.
point,
Yeah.
I would say there is a matter of degree, and that the Republicans are less limited by the public vote.
Right. But they didn't have Pearl Harbor. See, Pearl Harbor was clear to everyone. War Powers Act and all that. That was clear. And you see, Trump is trying to do the same thing, claiming the war is the invasion, equating the invasion of immigrants with the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Well, that script has been run a number of times in U.S. history. Send the Marines. Eric?
Do you ever read the other or watch the other side's exposés at all? Yes, of course the Republicans all want to get rich and they're corrupt and everything. But the main difference, the overwhelmingly and most important difference is they do not want to destroy the golden goose, Western civilization, which obviously the Democrat Party is doing everything in their power to do. Did you watch Elon Musk and the Democrats brag about their long-term plan to make it a one-party state? And all they had to do is put seed about 300,000 or so invaders in each of the 7 battleground states. It's all over with the shouting. Then they packed and they've bragged about it. They packed. Then they can admit they win all the national elections, and they get Puerto Rico and D.C. another guaranteed 4 Senate votes. Then they pack the Supreme Court, and it's all over with the shouting. And what did one-party states, no matter how idealistic and how much they talk about helping the poor, how did they work? Cuba, how did that work out? Venezuela, Russia, China, socialism in their history, how did that all work out compared to our corrupt, admittedly very corrupt Western civilization? They murdered over 100 million people, enslaved over well over. How does that compare?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Were you listening when I read the part about the history in the United States from 1944 to 1974?
Well, there were
no worldwide depression for 30 years. And the last 60, we've had 4.
Yeah,
there is a question of degree.
What does that matter? Yeah, they've had both kinds of presidents, Republican and Democrat, and
take a look at Thomas Hartman's book on the Supreme Court, and then we can talk about this. Dean, you had your hand up first, I believe, and then Carol.
I did, yeah. So 2 things, this whole discussion is why I have never been a registered Democrat, because I live in a non-binary world. And then the other thing is I keep coming back to is a benevolent dictatorship or benevolent oligarchy maybe the best form of government. Maybe it is.
If you could keep it.
If you could, well, that's the problem we're having with our democracy that was foretold 250 years ago.
That's right, exactly. Unfortunately, if you look at the benevolent dictatorships or the benevolent oligarchies, they didn't make it 50 years, much less 200. And we haven't really made it 200. Carol?
And real quick, the founding fathers would be astounded that the Constitution is still holding up more or less today. I mean, the hopeful ones, yeah. The optimists, yeah.
Yeah. Carol?
Yes. Information for Eric. The Republican Party, and most emphatically including those justices on the Supreme Court who were appointed, by Republicans, has declared war on women.
What?
Did you notice that they took down Roe versus Wade?
What does the Constitution say about abortion? I never found the word in there. It's a state. Everything that's not spelled out in the Constitution is to be left to the states. That is what they've said.
I'd really
Clarence
like
Thomas
to put that
is talking
discussion
about
off to another day. We have about
Clarence
30
Thomas
minutes
is talking
left.
about going after Griswold.
What do you think
That's
about
contraception, not abortion.
if you want to talk about treason and corruption, what do you think of the previous rulers, whoever they were, during the Biden regime, who deliberately, knowingly hid the president's senility for several years from the American public? And on video, you see them coming out, and his moped there, his spokeswoman there saying,
Is that better than having a president?
He's sharp as a tack. What do you think of
He's sharp as a tack.
What do you think of
he's totally corrupt.
Yeah.
He's a criminal.
Gentlemen and ladies.
The Biden crime family wasn't?
This is why you have an unspoken agreement of not doing politics. And David took a wild leap here, and in the hopes of getting an organized discussion.
Yeah.
And I can't get to the points that some of you are trying to make because there's so much interruption.
Right, and
so many side trips.
Stan, can you stop sharing your screen, please, so I can see the discussion? We can all read that on our own.
Okay.
There we go. And yeah, I don't know who's next, but yeah, we have gone way over the slippery slope as this being a political discussion. Way over.
Oh, there's no question that politics gets into almost every discussion of the future.
Right.
The discussion of the future at this point is that we're going to have to see a significant change in the way we deal with corruption, or we're going to continue to get more of the same of what we've been seeing. Being your third. Carol had her hand up first. Then I think Stan.
No, my hand was up from the previous discussion.
Carol just leaves her hand up.
All right, I'm gonna say two things. First of all, there may not be a need for two parties. There may need to be a need for like 7. I mean, there are a lot of countries like Germany and England and so forth where there are more than 2 parties. And
parliamentary is a better form, maybe.
Then the second thing I want to say is, and this is an olive leaf from me as a Democrat to anybody who wants to hear, the one thing that I think that the Democrats, and Pelosi was probably an example of this, was access to insider trading information that people in government have regarding the stock market. And there's a long history of good bets coming from politicians that were basically derived from information from some kind of a non-public access. So that I think is a concern as well.
And no political boundary.
Right into our definition of corruption.
And I think that the things that I saw, I'm going to talk about the election, the ETA, Election Truth Analysis, the Election Truth Alliance, ETA. I'll post this later.
Stan, they're on my list. We're not going to get to them.
Okay.
Yeah, would you show the third video?
Can I
The
real
third
quick?
link on that list of videos,
Hey, real quick. I've
list
had
of
my hand up
websites.
for 20 minutes. Eric mentioned the Supreme Court. The reason that Clarence Thomas and Alioto and Thomas were the only ones that dissented on a no-brainer vote. Clarence Thomas is wearing black robes because of Joseph R. Biden. I listened to every minute of that confirmation, and Biden wanted a black guy on the Supreme Court, and you'll do. Well, thank you, Joe Biden.
Well,
Did you have something else you wanted to say, Stan?
I've got this video ready.
It's very short.
Okay.
That's enough.
That's enough. Meaning in 4 years, we won't have any more elections. That's what I heard.
That's not what he said.
That's what I heard.
You understand that he was very unhappy in 2020 when he did not win, because that election was also fixed. He knew he was going to win. Well, almost. But they did a better job this time. If you would play the next video, it's 8 minutes. And we'll have a couple minutes to talk about it.
Hey, it's John. And before you skip this ad, did you see that a self-proclaimed MAGA warrior? Number one, if every vote
This is Thom Hartman with Greg Palas.
well, David Grider's put up his Democrat Party propaganda so far, but there are massive amounts on both sides, and it's very hard for us to know which is fully accurate. And the bottom line is, universal democracy is clearly failing more and more, and will be effectively replaced by something else. Maybe
Probably
democracy.
democracy.
Huh?
If Russia
Some
doesn't...
kind of limited democracy at best, maybe some sort of republic we can get back to.
Nope.
How do you know? Why?
The direction we're going at this point is toward warfare. It's not looking good.
That's true. China is, as China grows, passes us in power, war becomes more likely, a devastating war, yeah.
Dean?
Am I unmuted? I am. I'm eating. Sorry. So, IQ, Sanford Binet, is a number. And, just please hear me out. Mute thyself. And just like if I go to the doctor and they measure my height, and I am in a room with giants, we're all well over 7 feet tall. If IQ were, and that's just a fact. It's a genetic fact that is inarguable. Period. And trust me, a high IQ can be much more of a curse than a benefit. But yeah, I mean that there is a correlation between measurable IQ and a whole lot of other things happening.
That's true. But there's a much better correlation between energy use and GDP than between IQ and GDP. So that suggests to me that while it's complicated, that's not the major factor. With regard to today's
The
question,
major factor in what, David?
oh, in how well a country does.
Okay.
In terms of today's question, what's the likely future? It's not looking very good. We're going to have to change the way we deal with enforcing the laws that we have and creating better laws.
And how do
And
you
at the moment, I can't say I have high hopes for either of those issues.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
Absolutely great, David.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm going to stop recording and I'm going
Before you stop recording, let's mention what's going to happen next week.
Yes.
Because we're going to have our first hybrid meeting. That is, we are meeting in person at the Oxborough Library in Bloomington at our usual time, 9:30. And Bob Kaufman is going to be doing a presentation on the future of AI as seen by some of the more knowledgeable people working in that subject. And it will also be available by Zoom. So hopefully we'll have a chance for our out-of-town people to join us and get a word in edgewise.
Let's hope so. And that should be a lively, if there's time for discussion, a lively discussion, because many people probably have thoughts on AI.
I suspect. At any rate, I hope some of you will be able to join us there.
Well, David, I'm going to try to leave this. I have a stop sign. If I click on that, I can transfer the host to you, right?
Yeah, but I think we're pretty well done. I'm guessing we didn't change anybody's opinions. Would that be correct?
Right.
Well, you sounded a little bit sour and depressed a little bit on your ending there, the whole war thing. I thought you were the Tony Siva brighter guy with the Adam Dorg stuff.
And that was before Donald Trump was, quote, elected, unquote.
Right.
But there's a big difference between changing opinion and providing food for thought. And you have done the latter.